Said we're going to be picking it up from where we stopped on Sunday. But first, we have to remind ourselves what we learned on Sunday. What did we learn on Sunday? Let's start there. What was taught last week Sunday? Last week Sunday was part what? Part. I thought it's four already. Okay, part three of the economy of God's strength. And what was the subtopic? For draining spiritual strength. So Satan's instrument for draining spiritual strength was the subtopic. So how many instruments did we see? Three. What were the three? Enticement, disappointment and loss, and accusation. What example or who was the case study we saw under enticement? Case study, meaning the example, biblical example, the character in the Bible. We saw Samson as a case study for enticement. What about the case study for accusation? We don't forget just now. Now, wow. Joseph. Blessing, are you sure you were here on Sunday? Okay, yeah, we saw David. David was for disappointment and loss. For accusation, we saw Nehemiah, Sanballat, and Tobias. Okay? So for disappointment, we saw and loss, we saw two examples. Peter and David. Beautiful, beautiful. All right, so this evening we're going to be continuing from there. Still a continuation. We're not done. Some of the instruments of the enemy in draining our strength. So it's a continuation. We saw three. If we can see three this evening, we are good. If we can see additional three, we are good. Even though I listed eight here. All right. So number 4, threats and intimidation. Threats and intimidation. That's number 4. Threats and intimidation is also one of the weapons of the enemy against the believer. Threats and intimidation. So what's intimidation? Intimidation is simply the use of threats, and I'll explain what threat is. Intimidation is simply the use of threat, displays of power, or aggressive speech to provoke fear before confrontation. Let's take it again. Intimidation is the use of threats, displays of power, or aggressive speech to provoke fear before confrontation. We'll take it again. Intimidation is the use of threats, displays of power, or aggressive speech to provoke fear before confrontation. Alright, so what is a threat? A threat is an expression of an intention. A threat is an expression of an intention to do harm, evil, or damage to a person. Let's take it again. A threat is an expression of an intention to do harm, evil, or damage to a person. So when a person expresses a threat, or when a person threatens, they are simply expressing an intention to inflict evil, injury, harm, or damage to a person. And very many times, the threat further is further followed by intimidation. All right? And sometimes the intimidation will come in form of flexing of muscles, showing pictures, just acting in an aggressive way, just to show that the person has the capacity to carry out that threat. Are you following? So the goal of intimidation is to show the person who is being threatened that they have the ability to carry out that threat. That the threat is not just a vain threat, it's not a weak threat. They are not just saying things, but that they have the capacity to carry it out. That's the reason for intimidation. Okay? So, like we said, intimidation is simply to use threats, like we said, or to display power or aggression, right, through aggressive speech in order to provoke fear. So notice the goal of intimidation and threat is what? Fear. So one of the things we can state there is that if Satan can shoot fear, arrows of fear to the hearts of the believer, he has succeeded in what? In weakening the believer. You may be very confident before, all right, in doing what God has asked you to do, because that's where we said last week, for those of us who remember when we were talking about work in relation to strength, that anyone, how we know a person who is strong is the amount of work they can do, true of us. So when we say strength in a very practical sense, we are looking at work. And we're not just looking at natural or physical work. We're talking about spiritual work and spiritual capacity. All right? And so in saying that, we are saying that how we can tell if a person is strong or expressing strength is if they are currently putting their efforts towards doing what God has asked them to do. So while you are doing what God has asked you to do, Satan will often come to threaten us. I'll say it again. We'll look at some examples on. While you are doing or you are about to do what God has asked you to do, Satan will often come to what? To threaten or intimidate. Why? He knows that once you set out on doing what God has asked you to do, whatever that may be, it spells damage to his kingdom. It means that at the end of the day, or by the time you are done with doing what God has asked you to do, he will suffer loss, and he will be inflicting, or rather injury will be inflicted on him and his kingdom. So the reason he comes to intimidate and threaten is to stop you. And why? How is he going to achieve that? Is through fear. If he can cause us to fear, he can stop us from doing what we've already set out to do. First Samuel 17. Popular scripture. First Samuel 17. We've read it many times. Many times. So let's read it again. I'll just read through, don't worry. It's Bible study, but we don't have so much time anymore in Bible study. Those days, Bible study could be like for 2 hours. These days, it's not that I'm complaining. All right. Um, First Samuel 17. Let's start from this one. Now the Philistines gathered their armies together to battle, and were gathered at Socoh, which belongs to Judah. They encamped between Socoh and Azekah in Ephes Damim. Verse 2. And Saul and the son and the men of Israel were gathered together, and they encamped in the valley of Elah, and drew up in battle array against the Philistines. So it was time for war, okay? The army of God, that's the army of Israel versus the army of the Philistines. Alright? They were all prepared. Verse 3. The Philistines stood on a mountain on one side, and Israel stood on a mountain on the other side, with a valley between them. Verse 4. They already were prepared for war. Are you following this? One army was already on one mountain, the other army was already on the other mountain. Verse 4. And a champion went out from the camp of the Philistines named Goliath from Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Verse 5. That's verse 4. Verse 5. He brought a bronze helmet on his head. So he had a bronze helmet on his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. And he had bronze armor on his legs, and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. That's somewhere here. Right? Between his shoulders. Verse 7. Now the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his iron spear head weighed 600 shekels. And a shield bearer went before him. So his shield was held separately by someone who was called the shield bearer. So that one did not come to fight any battle. That one just came to be holding whose shield? Hello, people of God. Whose shield? Goliath's shield. Verse 8. Then he stood and cried out to the armies. This is where our reading is really starting. I just wanted to read from verse 1 to bring us here. So we are going to read from 8 to 11 really. Then he stood and cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, why have you come out to line up for battle? People came for battle. He's now asking them, why have you come out for battle? Of what use was this drama that Goliath was trying to display? Notice that we started by saying that everybody came out to fight, true or false. Everybody came ready. The armies of Israel, the armies of Philistines were all prepared, positioned themselves ready for fight. Now all of a sudden, we are seeing an isolated figure or character called Goliath, trying to distinguish himself from the entire Philistines army. To do what? Let's see. So he cried out to the armies of Israel and said to them, verse 8, Why have you come out to line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And you have the servants of Saul. Choose a man for yourselves and let him come down to me. If he's able to fight with me and kill me, that's verse 9, then we will be your servants. Servants there is actually slaves. Then if I prevail against him and kill him, then you shall be our servants and serve us. Verse 10. And the Philistine said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Verse 11. Notice this, verse 11. When Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, they were what? And greatly what? So what do you think Goliath was trying to do? To intimidate them by using threats. And my question to us was it working? Of course it was. Let's imagine Goliath did not come out. Everybody just stayed in their own different mountains. They all came for battle, true of us. Everybody was ready and everybody was positioned for war. There was no, I believe that at this point, there was nobody who was afraid. Everybody knew what they came for. So there was a bit of boldness and courage to fight. But guess what Goliath had to first do? Consistently threaten them. Let's imagine at the end of the day, nobody showed up to fight, to challenge Goliath. And they ended up wanting to stage a war. They ended up going into the battle with the armies of the Philistines. You think they will still have the same confidence that they had on day one to fight with the Philistines that they will eventually have by the time they have constantly been intimidated and threatened by Goliath? Of course not. And so do you think the strength that they would have put in before Goliath started coming to intimidate them would be the same amount of strength they will put in by the time it has gotten to day 40? Of course not. So Satan here was Goliath, okay? So Goliath's strategy was working. And notice if you go back to read, you find out that he was doing this for 40 days. Notice on day one, he came, threatened them. Their morale will drop. Day two, he comes, the same thing, threatens them. Their morale will keep on dropping. Their strength, their confidence will keep on dipping. To the point where by the time it gets to day 40 and the now says, okay, it's time for us to fight. Let the armies, both armies now fight. Maybe because there was no one man who could come to challenge Goliath. By the time it had gotten to that point of day 40, all of the armies of Israel would have completely been defeated before even the battle starts. So if Satan wants to defeat a believer even before the battle starts, what does he do? He intimidates. Hope that's clear. There's one other scripture that is coming to mind. One other powerful scripture that is coming to mind. So I'm just using this to establish that whenever you notice or you see that the enemy is coming through one means to another, through people around us, trying to intimidate us from doing what we know God has put in our hearts to do, rather than responding in fear, what must our response be? Our response must be similar to that of David. Let me show us David's response. We know the scriptures before, but let me just show it to us. Verse 20. So David, his father sent him on an errand to his brothers, and we know the story. He got to his brothers, where the brothers were amongst the camp of the Israelites, meaning they were part of the armies of the Israelites. And so David gets there, and the following ensues. Verse 20. So David rose early in the morning, left the sheep with a keeper, and took the things and went as Jesse, which was his father, had commanded him. And he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight and shouting for the battle. So now it was time for them to go for battle. If I'm following what I'm saying, well, we said what we said earlier, that by this time this was day 40. We'll see it. So, and he came to the camp as the army was going out to the fight. So they were going out to fight. And so they were shouting for battle. So they were trying to charge themselves. That's what they do, to charge themselves. After they pump themselves and feel, to boost their morale and feel strong, have a sense of strength or confidence before going to fight. So verse 21, for Israel and the Philistines have drawn up in battle array, army against army. Verse 22, and David left his supplies in the hand of the supply keeper, ran to the army, and came to greet his brothers. Then he talked with them. As he talked with them, there was the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, coming up from the armies of the Philistines, and he spoke according to the same words. So David also what? Heard them. And all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, what happened? Fled from him and were dreadfully what? The Bible did not just say they were dreadful. This was day 40. On day 1, what was their response? Let's read their response on day 1 that we had seen earlier, verse 11. Verse 11, day 1, when he first came on the first day, their response was, verse 11 says, when Saul and all Israel heard these words. Notice, what were they hearing? It was only words they were hearing. And it was the only words they were hearing? Of course not. They were also what? Seeing the guy, his height and all. In addition to that, we'll later see it, but I don't know if we'll see it in scripture, but as you go on in chapter 17, you see it. That there were 3 things that produced this kind of fear. Number 1, what they heard. Number 2, the image of the guy they saw. Number 3, the information they had about the man's past achievements. Are we following? These 3 things I just mentioned, they are very important. So let's continue. Because if Satan is only threatening you with words, it will not mean anything. But if he adds pictures, you start believing it. And if he now starts giving you feedback or information about other people who he has finished and slain, like the way he's going to is over. Your faith in that thing will now begin to grow stronger. And that level of faith is what causes what? Fear. It takes faith to fear. Yes. Faith in anything other than what God has said will lead to what? Fear. Faith in a threat, that's a better way to put it. Faith in a threat is what produces fear. So faith plus, if you want to do mathematical equation, faith plus threat equals to fear, or equals fear. So they had these 3 information, or these 3 things to work with. They had what they saw, they had what they heard, they had a previous knowledge and information about this man's record and his resume. I'm sorry I'm reacting like this. We'll see David. That David only... Let's see. The information and knowledge is powerful. So on day 1, all of this information combined together was what produced what we saw in verse 11. So Saul and all Israel heard these words of the Philistines, and they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Let's read NLT. NLT says they were terrified and deeply shaken, meaning that you could literally see them terrified. They were not just afraid. To be terrified is a great form of fear. All right? But that fear went with what? Trembling. They began to shake just by hearing his words. Verse, where were we just now? Verse 20. No, we are past 21. 23. No, 24. So verse 24 was by day 40 when he had come to speak or shout. So 24, and all the men of Israel, when they saw, in verse 11, when they what? Oh my God, you people, we are not here. You are not checking the scriptures. Verse 11, when they what? Heard. Verse 24, when they what? They saw the man. So I like to believe that they didn't even at this point in by day 40, they didn't even need him to start talking. By the time they saw him, they were not even, they could no longer even stand to be shaken. You remember verse 11, they were terrified that they would be shaking, they would be. But now, just by seeing the man's figure, what happened? They all ran away. That's what fear can do, intimidation rather can do. Especially when it keeps reoccurring. Satan keeps presenting such pictures. Satan keeps using that same individual over and over and over and again to show you that if you do not calm down in your workplace, you are holding Christianity on your head. They will gun you down with paralysis, the same way they gunned down other people in that same area with paralysis. Very recently, I was threatened again. Once in a while, I get threatened like that in my dreams. Very recently again, I was threatened. And in the dream, they were saying that there are other men of God in that particular area that they had killed. That if I'm not careful, when I wake up from such dreams, I'm very happy. I'm very excited. When I wake up, it means that, what do you know what that means? It means that you are doing something that is triggering them. You are doing something that is triggering them. If months pass, you don't get such feedback, or you are not seeing yourself battling something in. The point I'm making with all of this is he'll keep on coming. If he sees that your first reaction to it was not decisive, guess what will happen? He'll keep on coming, and the more he comes and keeps on releasing threats, releasing intimidation, what happens to the wall of your defense? It begins to weaken. It begins to weaken. So every time you choose not to respond to the threat or the intimidation of the enemy, guess what happens? Your wall of defense is weakening. It's only a matter of time. When he shows up, you will start running, like we see. Don't forget that we are just read. It seems like this mic is down. That we are just read that when David came, what did he come to meet them doing? Bible, they were going for battle, and what was their reaction like? They were chanting war chants. They were wailing, they were boosting each other's morale, they were all charged up and like, let us go and launch out on this attack and defeat the Philistines. They were high in spirit. But all of a sudden, the giant shows up. And what was their reaction? They ran away like chicken. You will not believe that it was the same group of people who were just chanting war chants that were all of a sudden fleeing the way they were fleeing at the sight of the giant. That's what Satan wants. That he doesn't even need to make so much noise anymore. He doesn't need to make so much effort anymore. But that he etches a permanent fear of him on your inside. And once you are that afraid of the enemy, you no longer fear God. You no longer fear God. Let's continue. In that day, same verse 24, they did not just flee, they fled because of what was not the nature of the fear that Satan has succeeded in shooting into their hearts. He describes it dreadfully afraid. I've never heard this kind of vocabulary all my life. Dread itself is a heightened fear. And then the Bible is now saying dreadfully what? Just describing the extent to which they were afraid. Let's read David's response. I just want to show us David's response. So the men of Israel said, have you seen this man who has come up? Surely they were trying to you know what they're trying to do? We read it. They were trying to convey the same fear that they had of the man to him. So have you seen this man who has come up? Surely he has come up to defy Israel. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches. And it shall be that the man who kills him, the king will enrich with great riches, will give him his daughter, and give his father's house exemption from taxes in Israel. Verse 26. Then David spoke to the men who stood by him, saying, what shall be done? Repeat yourself. That's what I was saying. I didn't hear it. Say it again. All right. So notice, what shall be done for the man who kills this Philistine and takes away the reproach from Israel? So how was David seeing this Goliath? How was he seeing the giant? He was seeing him, number one, as a Philistine, number two, as a reproach that needs to be what? Gotten rid of. Others were looking at the guy afraid and running away. How was he seeing him? Others were seeing a giant. What was he seeing? He was seeing an ordinary Philistine. How you see matters. And how you see is always powered by the measure of revelation of God that you have on the inside. Remember, we also said when we started talking about this series that your revelation of God is what powers your strength, is what empowers you, is what tells us the measure of strength you have. And it's that same measure of revelation that you have of God that determines how you see threats. If the way you see threats is to see them and then be afraid, then it means that your revelation of God or the revelation you have of God is not much, or you may not even have a deep revelation of God. So the way he saw the giant was he wasn't even seeing a giant. If you go back and if you continue reading, you find out that he did not even refer to him as a giant. He didn't refer to him as a giant because that was not what he was seeing. He said the Philistine, taking away the reproach, so he saw him as a reproach. And number three, description, for who is this what? Who is he? Who be Papa? Who born am? Invariably, if we're to use our own vulgar language or vernacular, who will it be? Who born am? So who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? How dare he? What was causing the others? Meanwhile, all the people that he was speaking to like this were people who were trained in war. The person who is talking was not trained in battle, and he was talking the way he was talking. There was something he knew that others did not know. There was something he did that he did not just only know, that he knew of who? Of God, that the others did not know. For they that do know their God shall be what? Strong. He was a 17-year-old boy. He did not look like any person who had strength in the natural. But the strength that he wielded was in who? In God. Was in God. Because of what he knew of God, it was enough to supply the energy and the strength and the power that he needed to take down that guy. So this was his response. Can go back and read the other responses. Okay. That his response was not like every other person's response because he knew God for himself. It was not general knowledge, Bible knowledge. He knew God for himself. There will come a time where your general Bible knowledge, where those who only have a general Bible knowledge of God versus a personal and one-on-one knowledge of God will be tested. Where there will have to be a distinguishing, a differentiation between those who know God on a general level, who come to God, who worship God with the multitudes and with the crowd, versus those who have a one-on-one relationship with God. And this was that moment of testing. Even the king of Israel could not stand where Goliath stood. Mind you, Goliath was not close to them, but Goliath was where? Far from them, when he would come and stand. The reason we say all of this is to say that one of the ways we can also test your place of strength is how do you respond to threats and intimidation? Do you cower? Do you get terrified? Or when you see giants, you see giants as bread. That was Caleb and Joseph and Joshua's response. They were seeing food, an opportunity. They were seeing an opportunity to eat. Let's leave it there. It's not. I could just dwell here. Let's leave it there. All right. So the threat of the enemy is meant to shoot fear in your heart, and if you fear, listen. This is also true in spiritual warfare. If you fear, you have opened the door. If you fear, you have opened the door. Let's be aware of this. Next point. Let's go to the next point. We are done with that. I don't want to overflog it. There's one I want to quickly touch this evening. Mockers and scoffers are also some tools. Yes, mockers. I would have said mockery and scoffing, but I'm saying mockers and scoffers. But we can say mockery and scoffing, whichever. But Satan also uses mockers, people, all right, to mock us and to scoff at us to the end that we are weak. All right. So mockery and scoffing are also just like intimidation. Intimidation and just like intimidation, okay? And threats. Mocking and scoffing are also psychological tactics of the enemy. Just to also infuse, but this one is not necessarily to infuse fear. This one is to sow a seed of discouragement. So to mock means to laugh at. To laugh at in a way that is meant to belittle, to shame, or to discourage a person from continuing God's work. So mockery and scoffing, that's the two, all right? They are the strategy of the enemy to laugh at in order to belittle, shame, or discourage a person from continuing God's work. In this case, to weaken a person's strength. Okay? To weaken a person's strength. So it's a weapon of also attack. To mock. That you have been doing a thing or you have been investing your strength in a certain direction and you have not been seeing results in quotes. And so guess what happens? Satan brings people around you to start laughing at you and start saying things like, all the years where you don't follow God, waiting be the proof. Waiting you feel show for them. All right? So the enemy's goal here is to attack our morale, to drain our willpower, to turn warriors to warriors. I'll say it again. Number one, the enemy's goal here is to attack our morale, to drain our willpower, to turn warriors into warriors. That when you ought to have been investing the strength of God on the inside of you into that same thing, doing that thing that God has instructed you to do, you now begin to expend your mental power and mental effort into worrying. Do you know it takes mental strength to worry? Oh, yes. It takes mental strength to worry. So it turns warriors to warriors. And it causes, or one of his other goals here, is to make a joyful work feel heavy and embarrassing. So that the work of God that you have been investing your time doing, and you have been doing it joyfully, you now begin to see it as a load. It now begins to weary you. It now begins to feel heavy upon you. And you now begin to feel embarrassed doing the things of God. You now even begin to feel embarrassed associating yourself with God and with his people. When you begin to notice that, it's a sure sign that Satan has finally come for your strength. Heaviness, embarrassment. We'll look at some of these signs, some more. All right? That's the next thing we'll look at after. No, not the next. Okay, yes, the next. That will be in part 4. All right? That'll be the next. Signs to show that you are losing strength. Even though we've already been talking about most of them, but we'll organize them. Okay? So when you no longer are experiencing the joy of God, doing what you are doing, it's most likely that the mockers and the scoffers have shown up. Proverbs 17:22. Proverbs 17:22. Are we there? Did I show us or mention to us some terms in scriptures that show that are symbols of strength? What were they? Who remembers? From part 1. Who remembers? The horse, okay? The ox, the lion. Another term, not necessarily I just want to mention this. Another term often used in scriptures as to show a person of strength is when the Bible talks about the bones. Are you following? When the Bible refers to bones, all right? For example, leanness in the bones refers to draining of strength. When you see such terms used, all right? All right, so I just want to mention that because of Proverbs, because you see that too in Proverbs a lot. Proverbs 17 verse 22. A merry heart does good like a medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. That's why I had to mention what I mentioned to us just now. A merry heart does good like medicine, but a broken spirit dries the bones. So a broken spirit equals a dried up strength. When we say that the bones are dried, we mean that the person's strength is what? Dried up. Are we following? So a broken spirit equals, so when a broken spirit shows up like this, when the person now begins to worry, now begins to say, why me? Pity party. He's now looking for people to come and pity him. And he's always in that state of, oh, now only me did this world. Why I be saying now my own different? Satan has broken that person's spirit. And how he also does it is through words. Threats and intimidation, very often, like we said earlier, are through words and pictures. Mockery also could also be through words and pictures. He will tell you things, then he will not compare you with somebody else who is not born again. Another person is making other one is making progress in quotes. Other one is riding a Lexus. You are still trekking. And you now say, where is your God? And you now go back and you now also be thinking about it. Oh God, if you are my God, before this year ends, if you do not do something, I will give up the faith. Those are proofs that Satan is actually winning. Your attention, he has succeeded in diverting your attention. And once your attention has been diverted from God, it's now diverting to things and yourself. Your strength starts dropping. Alright? An example, Nehemiah chapter 4, so Nehemiah. There were several strategies that Sanballat and Tobias used against Nehemiah. If you go back and read the entire book of Nehemiah, you get a clue of how the enemy, these different strategies that the enemy uses to come for the believer, and the different tools. So we are seeing another one, still in Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1 to 3. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1 to 3. You can make it from verse 1 to 6, but for our study, we'll just stop in verse 3. Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1 to 3. Are we there? Nehemiah chapter 4, verse 1 to 3. Alright, so verse 1 says, but it so happened, now we know these names should now be quite familiar to us, or we should be quite acquainted with them. So verse 1 says, but it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were building the wall, that he was what? He was what? I thought we all said we were there now. He was what? Furious and what? Very indignant. And mocked the Jews. So his mocking the Jews was born out of what? Fury and indignation, meaning that he was very angry. In summary, okay? He was very angry. And when Satan is very angry like that, he will show up to start doing what? Mocking us. Start mocking. So mockery very often is always born out of the irritation of the enemy. He's angry at what you are doing. He's angry at the fact that you are not sending any person. You are just committed and giving yourself to the things of God. And as you are doing that, your strength is increasing. He's scared of the strength that you have begun to build in God. And so he's irritated at the fact that this person who before he would just easily walk past that person's life, tread upon the person, match the person. If he wants to do anything with that person, he can mess that person up. All of a sudden, he no longer has access and entrance into that person's life. Because that was exactly what was happening with Jerusalem. Let me give this backdrop quickly. Because they were now going to be building a wall around Jerusalem. Once you start building a wall around a place, you have created a boundary indicating and stating that you can't just walk in and out of that place. Are you following? That's what a wall meant. You can't just walk in and out of that place. To walk in, you need to take what? Permission. You need to go through the due process. You can't walk in without a person endorsing it. So that was what Sanballat and Tobias were scared of, because that place, Israel, was a major trading route for them. They were generating lots of money from it. And now all of a sudden, because a guy came from only God knows where, even though we knew where it was coming from, to help Israel rebuild the wall, they were going to start spoiling business for them. Most of us don't know that once you are weak, your walls and your borders become porous. Oh, Jesus. I wish you heard what I just said. Once you are weak, your spiritual walls and borders become what? Porous. Just like Nigerians' borders. Sorry to say that. But I have said it. And what that means is that any Dick and Harry can just come into your life. Any demonic entity can just come into one's life to manipulate and do whatever they want and get away with it. Because there are no what? No walls. But when the wall is being built around, it's trying to say that this place is banned from illegal entry. Are you following? From illegal entry. So that was what they were scared of. So they were rebuilding their strength. That's one way we could put it. They were rebuilding their strength. And while they were doing that, oh, there was something I said. Let me just hammer on that as I move on, because we'll soon wrap up. That is, look at it all and all. I said that a believer who is spiritually weak, their borders are what? Porous. Their walls and their borders are porous. And what that means is that you have created a trading route for the enemy in your life. He can come and make negotiations with you easily and steal things from you. You know what the Bible calls stealing? It's not actually that he's coming to rob something from you. He is actually that he has come to make an exchange with you. Let's leave it there. We are not talking about spiritual trades. We're talking about spiritual trades and exchange. We would have talked about that deeply. The spirit realm is made heavily centered around transactions. But let's leave it there. What verse were we? Verse. So they were very angry and started mocking. You saw where we said mockery earlier. Right? Mockers and scoffers, right? So we also see it even here. That's what we are even looking at now. I thought that was what we said earlier. Forgive me. So they started mocking the Jews. Verse 2. And this was how they did it. Verse 2, he said, and he spoke before his brethren and the army of Samaria and said, why are these feeble, notice the words he's using, feeble Jews. What are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Notice the implication of building the wall. It is fortifying themselves. Fortifying yourself here means strengthening yourselves. Will they offer sacrifices? Meaning at this point, all sacrifices were not big. I wish we had time. I really wish we had time. Will they complete it in a day? What they were inferring when they said that will they complete it in a day, they were trying to say that the way they are doing, they are investing their effort, they are doing like they are going to build the entire wall in one day. Are you seeing how I was using to just make jest of them? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish stones that are burnt? So the more they are saying this thing, imagine you are one of those who were building the wall before. You now start looking at the rubbish versus this wall you are building, and you now be looking at it and be like, not true. Even if we start today, when will we finish? Will we ever finish? All of this was just to shoot arrows of discouragement. Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish? So there were stones in the heap of rubbish. They will not be looking at it. Now, wow, the rubbish plenty. There are plenty. The rubbish is a lot. Stones that are burned. Verse 3. Now Tobias the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, whatever they build, if even a fox goes up on it, it will break down their stone wall. What was he trying to say? He was trying to say they are just wasting their time. Even what they are building is weak. It will not even last. It's not strong enough. Even something as little as a fox, if it climbs on it, everything will fall down. Imagine you are one of those investing your effort, you are putting, you are sweating, you are doing all that you can to make sure that wall was standing, and you are hearing this thing. Will there not be a temptation to now begin to think that really this thing is really not looking like it's solid, like it's something that will stand for long? And no one go start something way after 2 days or 3 days, everything will just scatter. Shooting all of these things in your ears, or in their hearts. Let's add verse 4 and we'll end there. Look at Nehemiah's response. Hear, O our God, for we are what? Despised. So what the mockers come to do, oh my God, I wish I had time, but we don't. I really wish I had time. A lot of things have been skipped here since. That what the mockers and the scoffers come to do is that they come to ensure that they've come to despise you and your strength. To not just despise you, to make you look down on yourself, belittle yourself, belittle what you are capable of. Hi. And listen, nothing, and Satan knows this. Satan knows this. We saw this also in the generation that left in Egypt and were supposed to enter the promise. We saw the same thing. That you can't enter the promise if you belittle yourself. Even though God has spoken greatly of you, even though heaven has mobilized every resource towards you to ensure that you are able to become or accomplish that thing God has said about you. Satan knows that if he belittles you, is not enough. So long as if that his attempt to belittle you brings you to the point where you belittle yourself, we are just few. What can we accomplish? We are just little. How much can we do? Gideon too. We have never fought in a war before. Like Goliath. Compared to Goliath, we've not killed many people. Look at our height, look at his height. Belittle. Verse 4. Hear, O our God, for we are despised. Turn their reproach on their own heads and give them as a plunder to a land of captivity. And he started praying some other prayers till get to verse 6. I would have loved to read verse 6, but we'll stop here. I think I'll stop here. Should I stop here? I think I should stop here. If we took only 5, we tried. The next Sunday we'll go to the next part. Or should we add one more? All right. So we stop there. Any question?
You have to apply this to the New Testament believer. You shouldn't even keep down to keep down. But the more that the more you just as he's born in shutting down. That is the New Testament
Response.
What is
He didn't dialogue with them. Nehemiah didn't dialogue with them. Nehemiah did not dialogue with them. Check it. He didn't. He turned to God instead. And he moved the attention from them. He didn't dialogue with them. They kept coming with different attempts, but he didn't dialogue with them. Satan is consistent. It's one of the things I would have added. Pressure. That's also one of his tools. Pressure. He comes back to back. If he sees that what he's trying to weaken, what he's trying to frustrate, is not working, in that, as you read, if you go back and read that chapter 4, now when they tried and they saw that they had built the wall to a certain extent, in verse 6 says that because the people had a mind to work, they had built to a certain extent, they changed strategy. In the New Testament even, it's not only that the enemy is the one going to be coming directly. whispering thoughts to our hearts and all of that. Sometimes he will use people. And sometimes it's easier for us to dialogue with people and not knowing that we are dialoguing with Satan. Versus if he's coming into our thoughts. Sometimes some of us we've learned that once he's coming to our thoughts and we know that it's not, we silence it. But how about somebody around that you trust in, somebody that has your ears? He's not the one telling you, go back and read it, go back and read it, go please go back. First Samuel 17. It was his own brothers, David's brothers, that were telling him, what are you doing here? That's how you always do. They were trying to belittle him. That's how you always do. You have come here again with your wahala. Who have you left the sheep with?
They try to protect you.
It was not just, it was a false protection. Anyway, it was, in a sense, they were trying to protect him, but in another sense, they were also trying to belittle him. If you read it, they were also trying to belittle him. And that was why immediately he left them. He responded to them by saying, this, why you, go back and read it, you see it. He said, why are you highlighting me like this? Why are you coming for me like this? The reason I am here, is it not for a cause? Is it not for a godly cause? Any other question? Or any question? No. So let's have a that. Let's just pray that the Lord will open our eyes to the devices of the enemy, that He will keep us alert at all times. He'll keep us alert at all times.